What up, TCK Potters? Welcome back to the program. I'm your host, Sky Guasco. This is another episode of the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm joined again by my man, Bobby LaMarco. You can find us on Twitter, Sky Guasco, and Bobby LaMarco on Instagram, Fantasy Football _TCK Pod, and Fantasy Football X Factor. This is episode 434. Today we are breaking down our AFC South stud, dud, breakouts, sleepers, and we got a deep sleeper for you as well. Bobby, we have one more division after this one. It's going to be the NFC South next week. How are you feeling about the wrapping up here on the AFC South? We had a doozy last night breaking down the Titans and the Houston Texans, but I'm ready to go with the studs and duds. Always have a lot of fun with this series.
Nothing gets the TCK Potters going like a good Tyrod Taylor segment. So you know what? Sorry, everybody. He's not going to make this one, but we'll try to get as much as we can in for him in the future.
I love it.
Before we jump in, Scott,
there might be a lot of Davis Mills, though, so be careful.
A lot of Davis Mills. but of course, listen, we're people's work here, so of course Davis Mills is going to be included. Sky, as I always promise, we're going to do a hot topic, hot question, hot spicy question, whatever you want to do, talk about it today. And our hot spicy question is going to be brought to you by our partners over at Bomb Banana Hot Sauce. Make sure you seek thespice.com. This is a banana based, not a banana flavored. If you haven't tried Bomb Banana Hot Sauce yet, guys, you're missing out. Fantastic. Use the promo code TCK to get 10% off your order. And also you're going to help us out because they're one of our sponsors and we appreciate all your support. Sky, my question for you is, what was your toughest decision today? Your hot question of the day. You had studs, you have a dud, you have a sleeper, you have a breakout. But who's your number one honorable mention, and in which spot was it?
Yeah, this was a tough division, actually, because, I mean, again, we're talking about the AFC South. I'll break down the parameters per usual in a minute. Titans, Colts, Jags, Texans. A lot of fantasy relevance on the Titans. Honestly, quite a bit on the Jags, in my opinion. Not a lot on the Texans. And now with Wentz potentially out for a little bit and Quentin Nelson getting hurt as well, hurts the Colts too quite a bit, unfortunately. So I was looking down the list here, and of course we only take a particular set of players. You know, this sounds silly because I feel like you can kind of pick anybody in the deep sleeper range, but deep sleeper for me was tough. And I'll get into those names here in a little bit. Again, those are deep sleepers. Those are rounds 15 plus rounds. So you're really talking about somebody way deep there, you know, dynasty stash, last pick in a redraft league. But for me, it was tough. I'm going to save my actual player for later in the episode to break down. But an honorable mention here, and somebody I almost put down, was Paris Campbell for the Colts. I loved him coming out of college at Ohio State. Another one of these Curtis Samuel type guys, kind of a hybrid wide receiver, slot guy, movement guy, could take a couple carries potentially as well. He's battled injuries. The Colts have been hit or miss at quarterback for the last couple of years that he's been in there. A lot of high expectations coming in this year, but then Carson Wentz gets banged up too. So I didn't mention Paris Campbell. I've got another guy at my deep sleeper, but Paris Campbell's a guy that you're able to get in the 15th plus round here as a deep sleeper. And look, man, if you got a deep stash or you got a 3 wide receiver league, you need to have 7 or 8 wide receivers on your roster. Paris Campbell's somebody I might stash if Carson Wentz is ready to go in week 1.
You know, it's funny that you brought up Paris Campbell. I was juggling him around too. I actually took a look at the last 4 years, which quarterbacks target the slot the most. Carson Wentz finished 7th amongst qualified quarterbacks in target rate to the slot. So that's where Paris Campbell will make his living. But camp reports are saying he's behind Pascal Siakam.
Yeah.
Pascal Siakam. Zach Pascal. That's the Raptors forward. I don't even know what I was thinking.
I was going to say, is it NBA? Yeah. I hear you. And it's interesting because you talk about Zach Pascal and Paris Campbell. And I feel like both of these guys have had a lot of hype in the Colts organization for the last 2 to 3 years, but basically like one of them is always injured, right? They have a tough time being on the field at the same time. Of course, T.Y. Hilton has been the face of that receiving corps for a decade, but he's kind of falling off. And then there's a lot of hype with Michael Pittman, but now we don't know what to expect with him in year 2 either, because again, we're not sure what quarterback we're going to get for Indianapolis. So I think you and I both agree that he's a great deep sleeper candidate, but we both picked 2 other players, which we'll get into in a little bit. Okay, so let's get into the AFC South studs, duds, breakouts, sleepers, and of course, a deep sleeper for you. If you're new to this series somehow, basically what we do is we take each division and the 4 teams in that division. We are only talking about the AFC South in this podcast for the stud, dud, breakout, sleeper, and deep sleeper. That's the Titans, Colts, Jags, and Texans. Studs and duds are going to be players in the 1st to 5th round. Studs, of course, are going to be players that we think will at least hit their ADP and exceed that ADP. And then duds, of course, are going to be players that we think might fall behind their ADP for whatever reason. So in the 1st to 5th round, the players eligible in the AFC South, specifically Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, A.J. Brown, Travis Etienne, and my man Julio Jones. Bobby, I'll let you kick this one off here. Who is your stud for the AFC South?
Well, my stud for the AFC South is A.J. Brown. And I think I've made it very clear on yesterday's podcast that I love A.J. Brown. And the funny thing is he's now kind of slipped a little bit. He's going now towards the wide receiver 8 range at the 2-3 turn. And I consistently have him as a top 5 wide receiver. And here's kind of why. First off, let's just talk about his 2020. When he returned from his early season absence, he was actually weeks 4 on, which included his bye week. He was averaging 15.5 points per game. That was the wide receiver 5 in points per game, wide receiver 4 in points per game last year. So that would have been right just behind Stephon Diggs, ahead of guys like DeAndre Hopkins, for example. So right there, we've already seen that kind of little separation from that pack like DK Metcalf and also Hopkins. But now with the introduction of Todd Downing, it is something that is a little different. Todd Downing, when I want to explain something about Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith was a part of the Titans organization since 2011. He was there for the exotic smash mouth years. Mike Munchak, Mike Mularkey, like all these running focused guys. Arthur Smith technically was not even a Matt LaFleur guy. Matt LaFleur came in, he put in a good offense, and then he got promoted and used the same offense because he's a smart guy, and he built off the offense Matt LaFleur implemented. But that ingrained in his – remember DeMarco Murray monster rushing campaign? When everyone thought he was done. He had that beast season, I think it was 2015. Then also Chris Johnson, even after his 2,000-yard rushing season, he did have a couple more 300, close to 300 carry seasons while Arthur Smith was there. Todd Downing is not breaded in Titans history like Arthur Smith was. Todd Downing's a little different. He came from Oakland, coached under Bill Musgrave, also very run-centric kind of guy as well, but Todd Downing, the one season I talked about in this yesterday's podcast, he averaged 594 dropbacks that one season. That's a lot higher than the 534 that Arthur Smith averaged in his 2 seasons as OC. So that little influx and bump in potential dropbacks is actually 3rd in my opportunity analysis. And also the important thing about the opportunity analysis, this team has the 2nd most new available targets, which also factors in vacated targets and also the potential drop back projection for 2021. So long story short, if they do get closer to that projection with Todd Downing, you're looking at a bump in the actual production for A.J. Brown based on his career efficiencies. That based on all that data, he would have been the wide receiver 3 last year if he on his how many fantasy points he produces per dropback. So right there, I'm already starting to see if there's any additional pass volume. When you have a player that is this efficient, he's going to be worth a top 5 pick at his position, and he's going at 8, and he finished 5 last year. So he's already behind his finish from last year because of the Julio Jones situation. But I'm here to calm your mind. Julio Jones comes in. Todd Downing, the 1 year, I talked about this yesterday, the 1 year he was OC, he had Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper. They actually, when they were healthy, played about 11, 12 games together. They split work down the middle, 7.8 targets per game for each player. Last season, A.J. Brown only averaged 7.5. So if everything works out like it's supposed to and Julio's still the stud, I know Sky's a big believer in Julio, he's still going to potentially see a bump in targets. And he was the wide receiver 5. Don't overthink it. This guy is he's actually a tier above, I believe, than guys like Hopkins and DK Metcalf, because I do think he can get you closer to that 16-point area where Diggs was last year.
Fun fact, not true, but did you know that AJ actually stands for another Julio? So it's actually another Julio Brown, which is absolutely incredible there for Tennessee. Look, man, A.J. Brown is absolutely phenomenal, broken all of the, statistical, efficiencies for the last 2 years. We hope that keeps up. I'm going to just stay on the same team, same wide receiver core, and I'm going to get into my stud here. It's his teammate, his idol, frankly, Julio Jones. And I think it's a great clubhouse move that A.J. Brown at least offered up number 11 to Julio when he came over, and Julio was good to go back to, college number. So I love love A.J. Brown. I mentioned yesterday on the pod that I'm actually taking DK Metcalf over A.J. Brown by just a smidge because Julio Jones, in my opinion, is still Julio Jones. And I am buying this dip for Julio all day long. I'm very excited about this. So I'm going to go with my man Quintorris Jones here. ECR, wide receiver 18. That actually bumped up one from yesterday. ECR, wide receiver 18. I've got him at wide receiver 13. And I checked around the industry, and I'm the highest of anybody that does what we do on Julio Jones. So I'm either going to win this race by myself or look like a bozo. We'll see what happens. I've got him at number 13. ECR has him at 18, and he's going basically in the 5th round now, Bobby. He keeps falling. 412 here, but it was 5-1 earlier when I checked as well. He's right on that 4-5 turn. Unbelievable considering this guy's been a first-round pick for the last 10 years. Last year, Tennessee was 27th in total targets to the wide receiver position. Okay, I'm gonna kind of throw a bone to your boy here, A.J. Brown, as well. 27th in total targets to the wide receiver position. Not exciting, obviously. They had 270 targets total to the wide receivers alone. A.J. Brown was 17th in the NFL, 7.6 per game, as you mentioned, among wide receiver ones on their team in the NFL. Corey Davis was 14th with 6.6 per game on NFL wide receiver twos on their team. So not fantasy number twos, NFL number twos. A.J. Brown ended the season in PPR as wide receiver 12 overall, wide receiver 6 in fantasy points per game in PPR. Julio Jones last year had a career high 11.3 yards per target and his best yards per reception since 2017 with 15.1. He can still get down the field, and he's one of the best contested catching wide receivers in NFL history. Corey Davis was wide receiver 30 overall, wide receiver 28 in PPR fantasy points per game. Julio Jones, in my opinion, is far better than Corey Davis, even at 31 years old. Davis had 65 catches, 984 yards, and 5 touchdowns last year in 14 games. Julio Jones has at least 83 catches, 1,394 yards, and 6 touchdowns in every season since 2014, save for a week 3 touchdowns in 2017 somehow, and of course last year. So I expect Julio Jones, even with A.J. Brown there, with all these vacated targets that you've been talking about on this podcast for the last 3 months, all these vacated targets, A.J. Brown's going to eat. Your boy Ferkser's going to eat. Derrick Henry's going to get his 350 touches. And guess what? Julio Jones could still get 80 receptions, 1,200 yards, and 6 touchdowns at least. I think that's modest. If he does that, that's roughly 236 PPR fantasy points or wide receiver 15, your boy Amari Cooper. I think he could be closer to 90 catches, 1,300 yards, and 8 touchdowns, which would make it about 268 PPR fantasy points. Wide receiver 8. That's just the projection that comes out to last year's wide receiver 8. He's going as the wide receiver 18. I've got him at 13. I'm the highest around at 13. And I think him finishing at number 8 and A.J. Brown finishing at number 5 is not impossible, even with this offense throwing the 27th most pass attempts. The efficiency doesn't make sense, but the numbers don't lie. And you and I are about the numbers. It just makes sense. The projection for me, low ball, 80, 1,206. Realistically, I think it could be 90, 1,308. That's going to put him in the top 10, and people are falling on Julio Jones. I'm in for at least this one more year.
I agree. I think he's great going in the back of the 4th round now. I think that's fantastic. But we don't, it's not all rosy. Not everybody's a stud in this division. So let's talk about some duds. And my dud is Travis Etienne. Now, I know everyone likes the rookie, the new hotness, but I think some of the first preseason game gave you an indication that James Robinson is not going to go anywhere for a while. This guy is coming off a 1,000-yard rushing season. I'm not saying that Travis Etienne shouldn't be drafted ahead of James Robinson, but I don't like where he's going. This guy has risen all the way up to running back 20 in the top of the 4th round, ahead of guys like Julio Jones. I don't like that. So when I looked at Travis Etienne, I wanted to talk a little bit about Darrell Bevell and how they handled DeAndre Swift last year. Swift came into the league as a rookie. He played with Kerryon Johnson and Adrian Peterson early on in the season. First 8 weeks, they used Swift as a primary pass catcher, but they used Adrian Peterson on early down work. So that's a very similar situation you're going to see with James Robinson and Carlos Hyde. Now, DeAndre Swift was fine. He was the RB25, 11.1 points per game and half-point PPR. The point is, though, that's not difference maker. That's not going to be what Cooper Kupp could be, or Amari Cooper, or even Julio Jones could be for your fantasy team. That's flex numbers. And that's kind of why I don't really like Travis Etienne, because I see him filling that DeAndre Swift role in Darrell Bevell's scheme for 2021. But once he returned, so DeAndre Swift came back, and I know people are going to say, yeah, but he came back, got the full-time job. Number one, Adrian Peterson is in his mid-30s. James Robinson's coming off a 1,000-yard campaign in his basically second season. So I don't see him fading out. But if he does, DeAndre Swift averaged 13.7 points per game when he returned, which is fine. That's about back-end 18 to 20 range, okay? You're drafting him at his ceiling now, not factoring in the fact that if James Robinson doesn't go anywhere, you're going to get him, he's going to fall more towards the back end of that 24, 25 range, which is why I think he's a dud. But look at Travis Etienne. He's going to be a pass catcher. He's going to catch a bunch of passes. He's been with Trevor Lawrence for 3 years. Let's take a look at those years at Clemson. His first season at Clemson, they had T. Higgins, Justin Ross, Hunter Renfrow, and Amari Rodgers. That season, he had 12 receptions on the year. They didn't need him. Then all of a sudden, in 2020, flash forward, this guy flirted with 50 targets plus in this offense because they had no Hunter Renfrow. They basically had Justin Ross got hurt and T. Higgins was gone. So they needed Travis Etienne to be more of a featured player in the pass game. I don't think that's going to be necessary. You got DJ Chark. You got Travis Laviska Shenault. You got Marvin Jones. You also have Colin Johnson. And you also have the fact that he's not going to be an every down player. So even if you project his average 32 receptions from college into the pros, you're looking at about 50 receptions, which is good. I'm not saying it's bad, but he's not going to give you Alvin Kamara-esque type of numbers in the receiving game to make up for the fact that he might get you 150 carries at the most this season. So that's why I think I'm fading him. Guys, I would take over him: Cooper Kupp, Deontay Johnson, DJ Moore, Tyler Lockett, Adam Thielen, and Julio Jones.
Yeah, man, that's a big one. We were on, you and I were blessed to get invited onto the Believe Jags with our boys Phil and Jay recently, and we had Jay back on as well to break down the Jags earlier this week. And I keep bringing up, you just mentioned, like, there's a lot of comparisons with Travis Etienne to Alvin Kamara. And first of all, anybody compared to Alvin Kamara is just false. It's like saying, like, oh, this is the next, Saquon Barkley or CMC. Like, they're not. They're different players. Alvin Kamara as a rookie, okay, came in with 201 touches, 1,500 plus total yards, and 13 touches as a rookie. He didn't even get legit work until week 6. Alvin Kamara is absolutely phenomenal. Another comparison that has been made that you squashed right away on our show recently as well is the Percy Harvin take, right? Yeah. There's the thought that, Urban Meyer wanted to bring in the quote-unquote Percy Harvin, so he wanted Kadarius Toney. Well, Kadarius Toney ended up on the Giants, so his next best thing was Travis Etienne. But Percy Harvin was a, kick return, punt return specialist wide receiver, not a hybrid running back. So while he might be a great pass catcher, and he should get some great work in this offense, he'll be splitting time, number one. We don't know what's going to happen with the rookie quarterback, young receivers all over the place, solid receiving core, and a rookie head coach. And I know everyone's fading James Robinson this year after last year. I am too, with regression, but he's still there, and he did play well. So we'll see what happens there. But I would absolutely agree to pump the brakes on Travis Etienne. Okay, I'm going to stick in the dud category here, and this one breaks my heart. It really does. And you asked me earlier in the show, right off the bat, what was the hardest category to pick somebody in? I said deep sleeper because I was trying to find somebody that I could make a case for, and I feel good about my guy that I'll get into. But the dud category in this one was the same. Again, the players we're choosing from: Derrick Henry, obviously not a dud; Jonathan Taylor, AJ Brown, Etienne, and Julio Jones. Well, You and I just stood up for Julio Jones and AJ Brown. You picked Travis Etienne, so it comes down to Henry and Jonathan Taylor. And unfortunately, man, I've been saying it for the last couple of weeks. I got to stick with my gut here. My dud in this division right now is Jonathan Taylor, unfortunately. Marlon, right now he's going as the running back 6. I have him as my running back 11. I know that's not a popular take. I just said I'm higher than everybody else on Julio Jones. I think I'm lower than everybody else on Jonathan Taylor right now. He's going as the 9th pick in the first round and the 6th running back off the board. Let's not forget, Marlon Mack played 1 game last year and was lost to a ruptured Achilles. We all wrote him off, thought he would be maybe done for his career because not many people, unfortunately, your boy Arian Foster's a prime example, can take anybody down, unfortunately, with the ruptured Achilles. So far in camp, and I know it's just camp, but Marlon Mack looks good. He looked good in preseason as well. He's going to get work. Nyheim Hines is still around. He's the bona fide pass catcher. And Jordan Wilkins, who nobody's talks about, is also still around there as well. So last year, Jonathan Taylor, I just want to look at red zone efficiency right here because when I was doing research on Jonathan Taylor, and I've been talking about him all summer, I'm very high on the talent, but Wentz got hurt, Quentin Nelson got hurt. I'm just not excited about it currently. So I zoomed in on like fantasy gold nuggets. Where do you get your fantasy points? Through the pass game and in the red zone and the goal line. Well, we know that Jonathan Taylor could be a pass catcher, but like Nick Chubb, isn't going to get a ton of work. So let's look at the red zone and the goal line efficiencies. Okay. Last year, Jonathan Taylor had the 5th most red zone carries inside the 20-yard line. He had 48 red zone carries. He had the 4th most red zone touchdowns with 9 inside the 20. 8 of the 9 came inside the 5-yard line. So it tells me 2 things. 1, he's very efficient inside the 5. That is absolutely what you want out of your fantasy football running back. Unfortunately, that tells me that 8 of the 9 red zone touchdowns came within the 5, not outside of the 5 to 20-yard line. Only one of those happened that far. Not saying he can't do it, but it didn't happen that way. Now, when I zoomed in a little bit closer to other players in that area and had a comparison, he had the 11th most fantasy points. Again, 4th most red zone carries, 11th most fantasy points inside the red zone. That's not the right area. You'd rather have the 11th most carries, 5th most fantasy points. He went the other direction. Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, James Robinson, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and Alvin Kamara all had more red zone fantasy points on fewer red zone touches. So better efficiency than Jonathan Taylor. And then, of course, we've said this one a million times, but I'll repeat it. In the first 10 games, Jonathan Taylor was running back 19 in PPR. Nyheim Hines in the same 10 games was running back 16. Weeks 11 to 17, Jonathan Taylor went absolutely bananas. He was running back 3 in PPR, finished overall running back number 6. He was 3rd in the NFL in rushing yards, but Christian McCaffrey only played 3 games. Saquon Barkley played a game and a half. Joe Mixon played 6 games. Austin Eckler played 10 games. Nick Chubb played 12 games. And a lot of other running backs, Dalvin Cook missed 2 games as well. Zeke Elliott lost Dak Prescott. I mean, when you look at the first-round running backs and the first 2-round running backs, so many of those guys, unfortunately, went down, so the numbers were skewed. So if you dial it back to a year before here and you're looking at, general numbers and fantasy points, Jonathan Taylor simply would not have been as high as he was in his fantasy finish in a quote-unquote normal season. Now, unfortunately, we know history tells us running backs are going to get hurt. First-round running backs are going to get hurt. Jonathan Taylor's in a tough situation. Saquon Barkley might not be healthy, blah, blah, blah. It will happen again. But last year with the COVID and everything else happening was a unique season in that James Robinson, David Montgomery, Jonathan Taylor, I think are great running backs. But were their numbers extremely inflated because of the year that it was? Again, CMC, Saquon, Mixon, Eckler, Chubb, Cook, some of these guys missing time. If that doesn't happen this year, are those guys going to still be able to keep up? Jonathan Taylor, very efficient inside the 5, not the red zone. I'm worried about Carson Wentz being out. Even if he plays, he's not 100%, and he's still in the new offense. I'm worried about Quentin Nelson not being 100%, and Marlon Mack coming back. Even if he takes 5 carries a game or 5 touches a game, that's not what Jonathan Taylor's going to get. Hines is solid. Wilkins is solid. The draft capital in the first round for Jonathan Taylor makes me nervous, he might finish top 5 overall. The dude's an animal. My gut tells me not, and I got to stick with my conviction here. Unfortunately, Bobby, he is my dud, and I've got him and Saquon Barkley as my 11 and 12 running back right now, and it makes me sick, but the numbers just make them fall there.
Yeah, quickly with Marlon Mack. This guy in 2018 with Andrew Luck had 900 rushing yards in just 12 games and 9 rushing touchdowns. In 2019, when he played the full season, he played with Jacoby Brissett. That was a disaster year for that offense. So he still rushed over for 1,000 yards playing with Jacoby Brissett as a starting quarterback. So, yes, Marlon Mack's going to be a factor. But also factor in that Nyheim Hines is going to be the passing down back. I know that happened last year. But Phillip Rivers targets the running backs more than anybody. So now you're taking away from that and you're moving to a guy like Carson Wentz, who on average has been at 17% target rate to running 2016. That's not good. That's 22nd over that span on average. So that's going to deflate a lot of the passing game usage. Plus, let's hope Quentin Nelson's fine. They lost Anthony Costanzo this year. The lineup might be as elite. So I agree. Plus, I'm taking Nick Chubb, Antonio Gibson. I'm taking Aaron Jones. I'm taking all those guys ahead of him. So that's why I agree with you. But if you love these deep stats from a guy like Sky, and Sky, listen, we all can't be Sky Gawasko. Of course not. But if you want to start trying to be like Sky Gawasko, you have to start by ordering. Go to expandtheboxscore.com. Listen, I just got my first testimonial from one of my followers. He actually hit me up and said, listen, Dan, I downloaded. I went on to Expand the Box Score, and I actually did the TCK promo code. This is actually awesome. He's like, I've never really done advanced stats, but for $20, totally worth it. We're not joking. You're getting things like contested catches, routes run, broken tackles, missed tackles, fun advanced stats for a very affordable price. The best part, too, is it's risk-free. If you guys take the 4-day free trial with TCK, you get 4 days. If you don't like it, you can cancel. That's why I love this promotion. Use the promo TCK and go to expandtheboxscore.com. It's instead of be like Mike, it's be like Sky. Get your advanced stats at expandtheboxscore.com.
Makes perfect sense, man. You got to do that. It is crunch time, Bobby. Everybody's on the clock here in the next couple of weeks. Make sure you put yourself at the best advantage you possibly can. All right, man. I'm going to take another one here back to back. I'm going to go with my breakout here. These are players in round 6 through 10. Again, this is only the AFC South. Our candidates in this range: James Robinson, DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, Brandon Cooks, Ryan Tannehill, Michael Pittman, David Johnson, and Marvin Jones Jr. My breakout in this area is Ryan Tannehill. Very excited about Ryan Tannehill. You mentioned Todd Downing, and I think you broke that down well, so I'm not going to get back into it necessarily. But Arthur Smith moves on to Atlanta. Todd Downing comes in. They bring in Julio Jones. Derrick Henry's Derrick Henry, but they're going to throw the ball more than 27th most in the NFL, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm excited about a little bit of a boost no matter what in the passing game. That's obviously going to help Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill right now is going as the 11th quarterback in ADP. I have him as my 10th quarterback right now. Mike Tagliere, who good friend of the show, you guys know I love his content and trust his thought process and breakdowns. Mike Tagliere has Ryan Tannehill as his 7th ranked quarterback. I thought I was high at number 10. I started digging around and checking out where everybody else sat, and Tags has him at number 7. So feeling the flames for Ryan Tannehill. He's going as the ECR QB 9. So I'm behind by just 1, but we all have him about a 7 to 10 quarterback. And I just don't think that's going to happen in your public leagues, right? If you have your work league, you have your party leagues, your homie leagues, your home leagues, whatever, people are not going to be thinking Ryan Tannehill upside, right? He's not flashy. They're a run first team. It's Derrick Henry. People are just not going to target Ryan Tannehill in the early to middle rounds at all. He's going to be a late round guy. So you're going to be able to get even better value here from Ryan Tannehill. Right now, he's going ADP in the 9th round, but you're probably going to be able to get him in like the 12th in your personal leagues. Last year, he finished QB 7. And again, Mike Tagliere has him at QB 7 this year. That's the best finish of his entire career. He also had career highs in passing touchdowns with 33 and rushing touchdowns with 7. Then you have another year. This is year 3 with A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry. He now gets Julio Jones. Tennessee was 4th in points scored as a team last year. and second in overall yards on offense. He was 9th in completed air yards, 2nd in fantasy points per dropback, 5th in catchable pass rate, 4th in total QBR, and now, of course, he gets future Hall of Famer Julio Jones, so that can only help. If Derrick Henry slows down at all, then the ceiling is even higher for Ryan Tannehill. Henry is an animal, obviously, but he saw 378 carries last year. That's 75 more than his previous career high. He had 2,078 rushing yards last year, 487 more than his previous career high, and 17 rushing touchdowns last year. If he comes back down to earth, and let's just say he gets 350, maybe 2,000, even with the 17th game, we'll give him 2,000 again. But let's say we give him like a reasonable 12 to 14 touchdowns. That'll bring him down a little bit, and we can beef up the passing game. And let's not forget the last time we saw Derrick Henry last year. And this isn't a knock on Derrick Henry, but it's possible because he's a running back. He's not a pass catcher. The last thing we saw with Derrick Henry, he was playing the Baltimore Ravens in the wild card game. The Ravens held him to 18 carries, solid workload, 40 yards, only 40 yards for Derrick Henry. I know the Ravens are an elite defense, but 18 carries for 40 yards is not going to cut it. If that happens, Ryan Tannehill is going to open it up down the field with the play action, yada, yada. We know what Julio Jones does. Bobby and I have already talked about A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. Yesterday, we talked about Anthony Ferkser as well. My man Josh Reynolds is in there somewhere also. Ryan Tannehill has a lot of opportunity, and he has a huge rushing upside that people don't pay attention to either. 7 rushing touchdowns last year. I think that comes back down to 3 or 4 maybe, but nonetheless, that's a good floor there. And 30 to 35 touchdowns with these guys. 4,000 plus receiving yards, he's going to be just fine. So Ryan Tannehill, like you have Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers for me, and then it's Ryan Tannehill and Matt Stafford. That's like the core 4 of non-rushing quarterbacks, right? You get through all of your top-end rushing quarterbacks, then you have those 4 guys. I'd be happy to have any of them. I think in your home league, with all the hype with Stafford and the Rams and Brady and Rodgers as Hall of Famers already in fantasy and in the NFL, Tannehill's going to be the one to fall in public leagues. You could probably get him in your 10th, 12th round. I'll take him all day long and stack my roster elsewhere.
After hearing you talk about Ryan Tannehill, I'm jealous that I didn't pick him because I am obsessed with Ryan Tannehill. I think he might be one of my must-have players in 2021.
We're gonna get to our gamers here soon.
We're gonna get there.
Make the list.
I know, but listen, I'm going to talk really quick. Go listen to the Titans preview we did yesterday. I broke this down in detail why, but he's not the QB. QB 11 is a stupid way to evaluate his season last year. He was 3.3 points per game on average, better than the QB 13. So he was closer to the QB 5 than the QB 13. He's a different level. Plus the potential increases from Todd Downing. But another fun fact, his 2018 season, the last year in Miami, we saw him make a turn. His touchdown rate when it was at over 6%. That's close to where he was last year in touchdown rate. Also, his yards per target spiked. He just started getting better. This guy was a wide receiver in college. And then he played with Adam Gase. So let's give him a break. Listen, I just think the sky's the limit on him, all pun intended. I love Ryan Tannehill, but the reason why I didn't pick him is there's another guy I love, and that's Marvin Jones. Shout out to our boys over at the Jags pod. We did a great episode with those guys, but one thing they kept saying over and over again, Marvin Jones is the best receiver. For some reason, we haven't caught up to the idea. We don't like this. Me and Sky did age analysis a couple of weeks ago. We talked about how age 30 to 34, the guys still operate at about 92% of their peak age. So that means you're still going to get 92%. But we just saw last year in his 30s, Marvin Jones produce a solid season. And this guy is the only player on the roster that knows the offense from a previous year because he played with Darrell Bevell for 2 seasons in Detroit. He's going as the 3rd receiver of the group in the Jags. It makes no sense. I think that's going to change. We're starting to see him being drafted in the 9th, 10th round range. It's going to continue. I would even consider him starting in the 8th round after guys like Tyler Boyd, Antonio Brown fall off the board. I'm obsessed with him. But here's also the other thing. When you look at his stats with Darrell Bevell, the best part about Marvin Jones, he's proven the last 2 years that he can produce as a top 30 receiver. In 2020, he finishes the 16th wide receiver overall, 23rd in points per game, wide receiver 2. 2019, he finished 17th in points per game. If he didn't get hurt, the guy was a top 20 receiver in 2019. He ended up finishing 27th overall. Plus, look at Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is not the type of quarterback to check it down as much. I know the Travis Etienne thing was good last season, but what I brought up, he had Justin Ross, and also he had T. Higgins in 2018, that his monster season. Even this is his first freshman year when they won the national championship that first year. He dominated with perimeter vertical threats. And the guys in the Jackpot test will tell you, Marvin Jones has been his go-to guy. Look at the first preseason game. When he was in third downs, where did he go? Marvin Jones. Contested catch, Marvin Jones, he threw it up for him. Marvin Jones went and got for him. He's not scared to challenge defenses. He's aggressive, Trevor Lawrence, and that's going to be Marvin Jones. He's another one of my must-have guys. We'll get there. Gamers, we're getting there. I'm getting ahead of myself, but Marvin Jones is my breakout in the AFC South.
Man, you just mentioned like me talking about Ryan Tannehill makes you want to pick him for this category. I'll tell you right now, man, you beat me to the punch with Marvin Jones, right? Like Marvin Jones was going to be my pick, and I was like, oh, snap. And then I went with Tannehill because I love him too. But you and I could have made a similar case for both of these guys. Absolutely. Love Marvin Jones. I've made a case for him multiple times. And this is something important that Lucas, if you're new to the podcast this summer, maybe you're unfamiliar. Lucas Kaser was my co-host last year before Bobby came on. And Lucas would always bring up something that I didn't take seriously until the season unfolded last year. And he was crushing all of the leagues we were in together with his like wide receiver 4. And I was like, what the hell's going on? Lucas would always preach, everybody wants the Justin Jefferson. Everybody wants a guy that you're going to draft in the 9th round that's going to finish tops, 7 at their position or something. It's just not going to happen most of the time. What is very important and what Lucas preached, and he went for in multiple leagues, and it carried on very well for him. The ultimate goal is you need fantasy points to beat your opponent. If you don't have studs every week, you need to have people that are going to give you 12, 14 fantasy points every single week as a floor on your roster. I know it's not super impressive, but it matters. Julian Edelman, Jarvis Landry, Robert Woods, right? Marvin Jones over the years, Tyler Boyd, Brandon Cooks. These are the kind of guys that you can rely on for 11, 12, 15 PPR points. And if they score a touchdown, they're 20 plus. And that puts you over the top. They're never your wide receiver 1, maybe not even your wide receiver 2, but they're a top flex wide receiver 3 with a great floor. Marvin Jones is not somebody you're going to draft in the 11th round and expect him to finish top 20. It doesn't matter. He could, and he might. If he does, it's a super win. You're looking for a bolster right there, and there's zero risk in drafting Marvin Jones in the 11th round. All upside. Bobby and I are going to be chasing each other in drafts this year. I know it. We're going to be drafting guys like Marvin Jones in the 8th round, trying to beat each other. Yep. 2 ahead of ADP, but we're absolutely about that. All right, man, let's jump into the sleeper here. We got a sleeper and a deep sleeper. Of course, I'm going to get into mine here. And this one was interesting, man. Again, you asked me, what was the hardest category? They were all pretty tough in this division because you have super duper studs. And then you have some like, this could work. I'm going to go out on a limb here. First of all, I want to digress a little bit to yesterday. I was a bit grumpy on the podcast because I was cast a spell upon to come up with fantasy analysis for about 30 minutes for the Houston Texans. And that was a tough chore. Although doing that research and then sleeping on it and coming back for this segment for the sleepers and deep sleepers, I wanted to throw a bone to the Texans. And that is Phillip Lindsay. Our categories here are the sleepers. This is rounds 11 to 14 in the AFC South. Our candidates in this position here, Trevor Lawrence, Nyheim Hines, T.Y. Hilton, and Phillip Lindsay. I'm going to go with Phillip Lindsay here. He's going as the ECR running back 48. He is my running back 44. Has him some upside. And he's going in about the 12th to 13th round on the turn there. I don't have faith in David Johnson. Okay. I broke a lot of this down in the Texans yesterday, so I'm going to try to not repeat all of my stats, but I don't have faith in David Johnson, who's probably going to be a 3rd down back. I don't even think he's a starter coming in at this point. Mark Ingram and Rex Burkhead could be cut. Even if they're not, I don't think they're going to pass up Phillip Lindsay. Phillip Lindsay is like 6 years younger than all of these guys. Lindsay may start as the 3rd down back, but I do think eventually he becomes the starter before too long in Houston. I mentioned this yesterday, but I'll mention it again. Since the start of 2018, Phillip Lindsay ranks 10th among all running backs in rushing yards. He's averaged about 5. That's 4.78 yards per carry during that time. He had back-to-back 1,200 plus total yard seasons, 30 plus receptions in each of those seasons, and at least 7 touchdowns in 2018 and 19 before last year only playing in 11 games. Again, no risk, high reward. He's more than just a handcuff. Usually in the 11th, 12th, 13th round, you're drafting guys like Tony Pollard, Alexander Madison, Latavius Murray, the usual candidates. While those guys are great individual players, they are strictly handcuffs to the stud in front of them. Yes, if the stud goes down, they have more opportunity. Mike Davis would not be on anybody's radar if Christian McCaffrey didn't get hurt last year, but he did, and Mike Davis got an opportunity, and he did well enough to be relevant this particular season. Phillip Lindsay is getting drafted with the handcuffs, maybe the starter, and he's more than a handcuff no matter what. I don't expect much in a low-scoring offense, but Lindsay is a good player personally. He can break good runs, big runs, and big catches. He's a bye-week filler at minimum, and again, he could be a starter eventually as a flex play, maybe even an RB2 if they figure out some offensive weapon. Again, we're going to assume Deshaun Watson does not play. If somehow Deshaun Watson does play, even halfway through the season, Lindsay and everybody else gets a bump. For now, Lindsay is not somebody I'm targeting, I'll be honest, but in this group of sleepers, he is the one that I would actually look at in this particular group out of Lawrence, Hines, and Hilton. And if I'm, again, in the 12th, 13th, 14th round and I need a 5th running back, why not take a guy that has massive upside? We've seen him play really well. Again, could get you a 12 to 18 point, weekly run with the potential to score some touchdowns and break a big play or two. So I'm not crazy about Phillip Lindsay. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But in this group and in this range, you could do worse with a handcuffed drafted running back who could potentially be a starter. So don't forget about Phillip Lindsay.
Lost in the shuffle with the Houston Texans is Tim Kelly. I've talked about him yesterday a lot. Tim Kelly is a very good offensive mind. And I think a lot of people just think, oh, man, the Houston Texans are a disaster. They got all these random players. But the one thing that was a holdover with Deshaun Watson from last year is Tim Kelly. And since Tim Kelly became offensive coordinator, one of the things that's really improved is the ground game. Carlos Hyde had his only 1,000-yard rushing season in 2019 under Tim Kelly in Houston. Like, he was really good. He was a fantasy asset. He was like a flex play, but he was a workhorse. He had almost 250 carries. David Johnson last year had his highest yards per carry of his career in this offense. David Johnson, more known for his pass catching. Last year, he was better on the ground. This offense, I actually thought that Phillip Lindsay would be a great fit. If Deshaun Watson was the starter, if Phillip Lindsay was the running back, they don't need him in the passing. Carlos Hyde was barely used. David Johnson had some moments, but overall they want to focus their runners on the ground game. He could be a souped-up Carlos Hyde who finished inside the top 40 in points per game in 2019. The problem is, what are they doing? Like, is Mark Ingram's involved? If David Johnson going to get some early down work? Is he really going to just be a third down back? I have no idea. If Mark Ingram gets cut, there is some rumors there, Phillip Lindsay needs to be on everyone's radar, because if he's getting 12 to 13 carries a game, he's going to be fantasy viable. But the problem is 0 pass game work, and what's the touchdown equity? That's why I personally am not targeting Phillip Lindsay that much yet. But that's why I went with my guy, T.Y. Hilton. And I'm sure you're going to disagree a lot of this one, but I don't care. So, listen, T.Y. Hilton last year, I know we want – we just talked about this. We all want the Justin Jeffersons and all the new hotnesses. And listen, last season, T.Y. Hilton, Phillip Rivers comes in, takes some time to get acclimated, whatever. Down the stretch, second half of the season, not just 3 games, not 4 games, literally the final 8 games of the season, he was averaging 12.2 points per game. That would have been the wide receiver 20 last year, tied with Terry McLaurin, who's going just 8-9 rounds ahead of him. Totally get it. 3rd in the NFL in yards per route run, 9.6 yards per target. That would have been 17th in the NFL last year with minimum 50 targets. So he was really good. But the other aspect of this is look at his last 2 seasons. Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers. What does T.Y. Hilton do the best? He's a deep threat. Phillip Rivers averaged 9.9% of his passes were 20 yards or more downfield. That is pathetic. That is not good. Jacoby Brissett, listen, I like Jacoby Brissett, but he's a backup quarterback. He also banged up his knee, and he was not throwing deep either. The last time we saw T.Y. Hilton with anybody that could throw the ball deep was Andrew Luck, and that was 2018. He was pretty good that year, 1,200 yards receiving. Listen, Carson Wentz, prior to last season, was very efficient. On his career, he averages 13% of his passes downfield. That 3.1% jump potentially, that's about 19 more deep shots, of course, the season based on their total attempts last year. That's more looks for T.Y. Hilton. Plus, Michael Pittman was on the field last year. And guess who it was? It wasn't Michael Pittman that got better down the stretch. It was T.Y. Hilton. My thing is T.Y. Hilton's going in like the 12th round. I honestly think at this point, sometimes, and he's another one of these guys, T.Y. Hilton's 31 years old. He's basically the same age as Julio. And my thing is, so if we're not worried about Julio's age, we shouldn't be worried about T.Y. Hilton's age. Plus, camp reports, listen, Jacob Eason, I totally get all that. Carson Wentz injury. But my thing is, over the course of the season, I think T.Y. will probably be dropped the first 2-3 weeks because Jacob Eason's not going to be good enough. So honestly, you might not even have to draft him, but keep him in mind. Once Wentz starts getting back, gets acclimated, I just think T.Y. Hilton is still a little bit left in the tank, and that's why he's my sleeper of the AFC South.
If he's on waiver wires, I would race out to get him off waiver wires. I don't want to spend a draft pick on him because, and look, it's not like I'm taking Phillip Lindsay over T.Y. Hilton necessarily, but in that range of other guys, and again, we're only talking about the AFC South today, there are other guys in that range that I just think have tremendous upside. And while T.Y. Hilton may still have more in the tank, and I agree with you, Phillip Rivers and Jacoby Brissett are certainly not Andrew Luck or a 2017 version of Carson Wentz, if he can get right. You did mention it, but I'll say it again. In PPR, he was the 11th wide receiver in weeks 12 to 17 to end the season. But my favorite stat, maybe, Bobby, will be the first 11 weeks of last year. Do you remember where T.Y. Hilton was? I know you do PPR or half PPR, I do full, but either way, can you guess where T.Y. Hilton was in PPR weeks 1 through 11 cumulative?
82nd.
85th. Very good. Between Jacoby Grant, who? Exactly. And KJ Hamler. Oh, the one-shot rookie from last year. Exactly. So I know he finished strong, and I hope it works out because T.Y. is a beast when he's right. I'm nervous about the Colts. I just mentioned how nervous I am about Jonathan Taylor. I'm probably going to fade T.Y. Hilton. You made a great case for him. And again, if he gets dropped in the first couple of weeks, I'd love to pick him up for free as my 5th or 6th receiver. But in the 12th round, I still think I could find some value elsewhere. And I'm probably not going to go for that personally, but I think you made a quality case. Okay, man, we still have our deep sleepers. But before we get into that, I want to give a shout out to our final sponsor of the episode. Now, this one is going to be exciting, man. A lot of people are getting back into live drafts. We have Draft with Red Zone. We have draftwithredzone.com. Promo code TCK, of course, for 10% off. These are for the folks. I just got hit up while we're on air here. I got my phone in front of me for stats and timer and all this stuff. One of my buddies in my home league here, we've had a live draft for 12 years. He literally texted me about 15 minutes ago and said, yo, are we doing a live draft this year? What's the deal? Let me get the deets. And I just haven't put it out to the league yet. Absolutely. We're going to try to do a live draft with protocols and everything else. I live in Oregon. It's still very shut down for us, unfortunately, but other places it is much more open. If you're into the live draft, here's what you get. On YouTube, you can see the screen for the podcast. Just check this out. You get a 3x5 draft board. That's 14 teams, 20 rounds deep. You get the color-coded, traditional, different team tag, player tag names. You get the green, the blue, the red, the purple, the yellow for your different positions. You got Smack Talk boards. You get a custom ring for the league, and they will engrave in the league and the year for you. That's about $50 value by itself here. You're going to get 10% off of that with the promo code TCKPod. Make sure you reach out to Red Zone Draft Boards over the next couple of weeks. Give them a few days to get it to you before your draft coming up next weekend. I know a lot of drafts kick off next weekend. The week after that, I do a lot of mine like Labor Day weekend and things like that. So make sure you reach out to Draft with Red Zone ASAP. Tell them TCK sent you and use the promo code TCK for 10% off. All right, Bobby, we got our deep sleepers here, man. I will let you kick off with this one. Who is your deep sleeper in the AFC South?
Okay, first off, it's Anthony Ferkser. And let's address something real quick. Let's address something real quick for everybody. Number one, I saw these little down arrows on Anthony Ferkser stock because the first preseason game. Okay, let's all break this down for you. How many snaps did Ryan Tannehill play? Sky, you want to take a guess?
I'm going to say 0.
0. How many Derrick Henry play?
Less than 1.
That is correct. How many did A.J. Brown and Julio Jones play?
Definitely less than 1.
So it doesn't mean anything. Are you I mean, like I got.
This
I
is
mean,
this is the math people come here for. People come
like,
to PCK for this kind of math. I love it.
I'm sorry, it doesn't until Ryan Tannehill steps on the field. It doesn't matter what they do. I don't care what was going on. I don't care how Ferkser playing less snaps than Goff Swaim and Luke Stocker is a good thing because the real starters were not on the field. So now that we got all that crap out of the way, let's talk about why he's a deep sleeper for 2021. Last season, the Titans were third in the NFL in generating points to the tight end position as a team, 13.9 points per game. Okay? If you take Jonnu Smith and Anthony Ferkser last year, basically no one wants to know this, but they basically almost split targets 50-50 last year. If you combine their stats, they're just a tight end 4, a nice casual $177 and 11 points per game, Sky. So that's elite tight end numbers. Okay? Jonnu Smith, 65 targets. Now let's talk about those boys that they replaced Jonnu Smith with. Oh, yeah, Luke Stocker and Goff Swaim. Jeff Swaim, still don't know his name. Combined in their careers, 32 targets and 27 targets are their career highs. These are not pass catchers. Last season, slot usage, it wasn't Adam Humphries. It wasn't, that A.J. Brown fella. It wasn't Corey Davis. It was Anthony Ferkser who led the team in slot usage. I mean, what do we want? They promoted their tight ends coach. You think the tight ends coach is going to go, you know what, let's throw to the receivers and running backs a little more. The tight ends coach, Todd Downing, is going to say, let's keep our boys out there. A little handshake agreement from former position coach to make sure that Anthony Ferkser is still lighting things up. Now, listen, if the second preseason comes out and Ryan Tannehill is running and gunning for 2 series and Anthony Ferkser's on the sideline, you can cancel this and say, Bob, # you were wrong. I will bow down. I will. But I guarantee you, Anthony Ferkser is going to be out there every important pass play, and he's going to make a play or two. And you guys are going to say, you know what? Maybe that crazy Ginger's right. Anthony Ferkser, deep sleeper. Tell us about
man.
Guy.
I love it. I love the conviction. And here's another thing to think about too. When you get a promotion from the position coach specifically, obviously that generally helps out. Let's turn it all the way back. When Arthur Smith took over as offensive coordinator years ago, Delaney Walker was still running the show for the tight ends. He saw an increase and bump there. And, of course, Jonnu Smith, although unfortunately not as dynamic as I think we all thought he could be, the efficiency was there. The targets were there. And, of course, he was splitting time in the last couple of years. So Anthony Ferkser's essentially not even getting drafted, certainly in redraft. So he's a free guy, deep tight end. And, Bobby, if you don't go with one of the big 3 or you take a chance on Hawkinson, Andrews, or Pitts,
Tyler
Higbee, or you punt all the way to the end, I think you could do worse, than taking a guy like Anthony Ferkser, Adam Troutman, Gerald Everett, somebody like these guys. Take 2 of those guys in your final 2 picks and see which one becomes Robert Tonyan or Logan Thomas. I like it a lot. Okay. My deep sleeper in this division, again, after boo-hooing yesterday, I'm going to throw another bone to the Houston Football Texans. The deep sleepers are rounds 15 plus. These are way down the list here. I mentioned my honorable mention, Paris Campbell. You have Darrington Evans, who is the backup who will never play unless Derrick Henry gets injured. Carson Wentz, your boy Ferkser. Deshaun Watson, which is we're not going to talk about, but there's that situation. Marlon Mack, who I just said was playing pretty well. Nico Collins, my man Josh Reynolds, who comes over from the Rams. Then you have Tyrod Taylor and Mark Ingram. Okay. Let's see here. We have Nico Collins. Nico Collins is going in the 20th round right now. So, again, undrafted pretty much. Wide receiver 84 from ADP and wide receiver 92 in ECR. I don't have much to tell you about Nico Collins because he's a rookie out of Michigan with a bad quarterback in college, and Michigan is not a throwing university. They weren't even a throwing university when some guy named Tom Brady used to go to school there 35 years ago. But he's 6'4". He was second in contested targets in 2018 and 2019 in all of college football when he played at Michigan. So last year, obviously, is a mess with COVID and blah, 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 and Michigan's been a train wreck the last 15 months. But in 2018 and 19, he was second in all of college football in contested targets. Now, he's buried on the depth chart right now, but the names that they brought in, the Texans offseason is more than perplexing. You mentioned all the running backs, right? Like Mark Ingram at this point of his career, Rex Burkhead at this point of his career make no sense. The fact that they basically gave away Nuke Hopkins in his prime to the Cardinals, brought in an old and hurt, and, shouts out to the incredible David Johnson for one season years ago. David Johnson, they make that switch, and now you have these wide receivers. Bobby, let me see if you've heard of any of these guys. Andre Roberts was on the Raiders, I think, 9 years ago. Brought him in for $2.6 million. Chris Conley, who I know you were very excited to see his 3 targets on the last game. He brought him in for 1.5. Chris Moore, literally never heard of him, 1.3. And then they traded for Anthony Miller, who's a bad clubhouse guy in Chicago, incredibly talented. Chicago didn't want him. They got rid of him. They bring in Anthony Miller. So Nico Collins, unfortunately, is buried behind all these guys on paper. But behind Brandon Cooks, I don't expect any of these guys to outpace Nico Collins once he finally gets his feet underneath him. And depending on who is the quarterback, if it's Davis Mills, Tyrod Taylor, whatever, eventually I think Nico Collins becomes that guy. He's undrafted, number 2. I know number 2 on the Texans isn't exciting, but he's going to be the number 3 before too long at least, maybe the number 2. And I know they're not going to score a lot of points and be a prolific offense without Deshaun Watson, but, a lot of people don't like garbage time. Guess what? Fantasy football loves garbage time. Loves garbage. You know who loves garbage time? Matt Ryan, right? Matt Ryan loves garbage time. The Falcons are down by 15 in the second half every week. And guess what? 285 yards and 3 touchdowns in the second half every single week. This could absolutely happen with whoever's playing quarterback, and Nico Collins here with the Texans are going to be behind by multiple scores almost every single week, playing from behind. They're not going to be dinking and dunking to running backs. They're going to be trying to chuck it to at least compete for other jobs. These guys have pride minimum. It's not up to the players how shitty the organization is. They're going to be trying to get jobs and hopefully get out of Houston minimum. Again, Nico Collins buried. Just keep an eye on him. He's a dynasty stash minimum.
Yeah.
He's a deep roster guy in redraft. And again, another guy on waivers that you might not even draft. Keep an eye on him come week 3, week 4, week 5 as things start to envelop. He might catch 2 or 3 touchdowns all of a sudden and get on people's radar. Be ahead of the curve. 6'4", second in all of college football in contested targets 2018 and 19. Terrible quarterback play at Michigan. I love this kid.
The thing I like about Nico Collins is that he started earning first-team reps already. He's like,
Exactly.
This is not a joke. Like, this guy's already lapped everybody. He actually played with Tyrod Taylor. Now, Tyrod Taylor did play, and Nico Collins was on the field. That's what I like to see. Brandon Cooks, of course, didn't play. One of the things I heard about recently, what they're exploring, is actually moving Brandon Cooks to the slot, having Nico Collins and Conley on the outside. So that's something to monitor, too, because if he just takes over in 3 receiver sets, Tyrod Taylor is one of the very few quarterbacks that doesn't lean slot heavy. He actually does throw it to the perimeter a lot. We saw it with Mike Williams, that one star. He actually outproduced Keenan Allen. So something to keep in mind for Nico Collins. But I do think this is more of a long-term than a short-term, but I do like the name for Dynasty.
Again, man, deep sleeper. It's going in the 20th round right now. Why not? Throw a dart at him. All right, Bobby, that wraps up our sleepers, breakouts, studs, and duds with a deep sleeper as well. Any final thoughts on the AFC South as a whole before we get out of here?
No, I just love you, Sky. That's it.
Love it. I love you too, brother. We have wrapped up 7 of the 8 divisions. We have got the NFC South coming up next, and we're going to wrap up all of our team previews. It has been a long journey. If you haven't caught all the other teams, dial it back into our episodes. This is episode 434. We want to thank our sponsors today, Bomb Banana Hot Sauce, of course, Expand the Box Score, and Draft with Red Zone. Make sure you reach out. TCK is the promo code for all of them to get your percentages off. This is the AFC South studs, duds, breakouts, sleepers, and deep sleepers. We'll be back with you with another episode. We have some great announcements coming up this weekend. Stay tuned. This episode and all episodes have been brought to you by Believe Podcast Network and Bet Online. Bet Online AG and the mobile app. Bet Online, your online sports betting experts. For Bobby LaMarco, I'm Scott Guasco. We are out of here.